There's no point having endless, furious debates with people in America about a cultural thing, which is the love of guns and everything else. I don't want to get into that old debate. I want to focus it very particularly on the fact you're going to have a lot of students, young students, a lot of them under pressure, maybe psychological pressures. They're like early 20s, they're not fully mature perhaps, and they're all going to be wandering around with armed guns. It just strikes me it's a recipe for total disaster, where never mind criminals and other people coming in, the real danger may be from unsettled, disturbed students having the ability to walk around freely with guns and maybe use them against fellow students.
Wait, so I'm clear on this. Are you suggesting that a potentially psychopathologically disturbed student who is intent on doing harm with a firearm is now not going to do harm with a firearm because there's a law that says he can't? Where does that work?
What I'm saying is...
I don't understand, like...
What I'm saying is that, you see, there's always this thing, and I think you've said this, that you know, schools and colleges and so on, they're gun-free zones, that the criminals and the mass shooters always target gun-free zones. But that's complete nonsense. You know, at Columbine, at Virginia Tech, there were armed guards. It made no difference. Fort Hood, one of the most protected military bases in the world, was attacked twice with mass shooters. It makes absolutely zero difference to me whether they are places that have guns or not. Mass shooters are deranged people who want to commit carnage. But the particular issue here is whether it makes any real sense to have a bunch of students going into colleges up and down America, led by Texas and 8 other states, all armed, where any kind of dispute or any kind of very passionate debate in a classroom. I've seen some of the teachers at this university in Texas saying, we hate this because tempers flare, passions run, young students get very animated. What happens if in the middle of a heated debate some kid pulls out a gun and starts shooting? And before you say it can't happen, it does happen.
Piers, the two examples, ironically, you just used prove my point, not yours. I read the after-action report in Columbine. We did a detailed one with the Secret Service. The armed guard actually altered the trajectory of that event and potentially saved lives. I don't know if you know that. Secondly, the Fort Hood shooter was stopped by men with guns. I mean, you just used two examples that make my point, not yours. I don't understand where you're going with that. And secondly,
here's my point that in both those cases, it was an armed guard and it was armed soldiers, people who I have absolutely no problem being armed. I think law enforcement should be armed. It was them that dealt with this. Why would young 20-year-old students who are nowhere near as proficient with these guns in a live shooter situation, why on earth would you entrust them to deal with this better than law enforcement or guards on campus?
Because I don't trust a deranged gunman on a campus to stop killing people because he believes that, you know, the students in the crowd believe in gun control or believe in some progressive ideology. I would rather these students have a chance to actually defend themselves. I mean, we're talking about taking away a person's right to defend themselves because you believe what? That a criminal is just not going to enter onto a gun-free campus because the sign posted said as much?
Let me ask you this. You've served for 2 presidents on security details, right? How many people at the White House outside of the Secret Service are allowed to have open carry guns? Because they are under attack, potentially, more than any other employees in the world. How many people at the White House were allowed concealed carry? If you take your argument to its logical conclusion, then surely everybody employed at the White House, which is a massive terror target, should be allowed to have open carry permits for guns, shouldn't they? But they don't, because people entrust the Secret Service armed, trained people to do that job. That's my point.
Well, valid point. It's a good point. I don't make the Secret Service rules, and certainly the White House is an exception. I think we can all agree. You can't compare the White House to everything else. I mean, that's kind of, you know, reductio ad absurdum. I mean, we're making the argument absurd at this point, comparing the White House to a college campus. But your point is not an invalid one in that specific case. But we do allow people armed onto the complex. There are very specific requirements. But again, on a college campus, you're talking about taking away the right for a law-abiding American student just because he happens to be maybe young or in college and it's stressful. Everybody's under stress. So you're going to take away his right to defend himself? For what? I don't understand. And you think you're going to make him safer in the long run, or her?
Okay.
I doubt it. You know, there's a problem with sexual assault on college campuses as well. Don't women have the right to defend themselves, Piers? I mean, what are you going to use? Foul language against an attacker?
Okay,
you know,
well,
guns happen to be a force equalizer in those cases.
It's a massive issue, obviously, and Dan Bongino, we appreciate your time this morning talking about it. I think one of the points you're making, Piers, is, of course, if you have more access to guns, the question is, how does that reduce the risk from firearms?
Look,
but it also occurs to me that if you have a situation where perhaps somebody with, you know, the wrong motives wants to target people and they're allowed to carry guns onto campus, at least, you know, in a place where you're not allowed to carry them, when somebody has is armed, that raises a concern. In this situation, everybody's allowed to be armed.
There was a report yesterday that background checks in America for guns have reached new record levels this week.
Because more people are going out to get them.
Because more and more people are buying guns. And it's precisely because of Dan's argument. You know, I respect him, he served in the Secret Service, but that point about the White House is valid in the sense that they don't let people carry guns around there for a reason, because they have trained people to do it. With respect, there's not a shred of remorse in your daughter's face in these pictures. And I'm not addressing this to her because she's only 12 years old. She's a kid. I'm addressing it to you because you've clearly influenced her into doing this.